Katie was actually stabbed 99 times.
It's just, yeah.
I honestly couldn't believe the amount of injuries that she'd got. Just a quick disclaimer, the content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, crime scenes and other disturbing material. Listener discretion is advised. This episode is sponsored by Think Forensic.
Think Forensic are a one-stop shop for all things forensic science and crime solving. They hold experience days, as well as corporate events, team building events, and general education for primary school right the way up to university level, as well as other events and consultancy. There's also a shop where you can get your hands on all things crime solving, from evidence gathering to packaging and collecting evidence, as well as other forensic science equipment.
For more information or to book on an experience day, please visit the website. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Grave Secrets podcast. We're your hosts, I'm Annie.
And I'm Beth. Today we've got a case study episode for you. This, in terms of kind of timeline and those involved, is quite, or should be, an easy one to follow.
Yes, which makes a change.
It does make a change.
Some of the ones that I edit, I'm like, wow, this is hard to follow.
Hard to follow, backwards and forwards, lots of dates and times and names. So hopefully this one will be a little easier to follow. We are going to warn you, it is a really horrific case. I know we mentioned that a lot because obviously all of these, I mean, ultimately we are talking about murder.
Yeah. This one in particular, though, I just found really disturbing when we were researching. There was lots of stuff that I was just like, wow, that is awful.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is another case where it was murder within a relationship. I say that they had actually split up.
Yeah.
So it was an ex-partner.
But they do say, don't they, when a woman is leaving, is when she is most in danger. And I think this case just really puts that into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get stuck in straight away. We are talking today about the murder of Katie Higton and Stephen Harnett. And we'll start with Katie because ultimately that's how we're led to the situation that unfolds. Katie Higton was born in 1995, same year as me. She was born on the 10th of June and she was 27. She was a mother of 4 and she was living in Dalton, Huddersfield. So again, this case...
It's very local and it's not that far away from us where we are now. And I actually remember this happening at the time. And I remember seeing it in the news and it was obviously all over the local newspapers.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in my kitchen and thinking, wow, this is probably less than a 10-minute drive from where I'm living.
Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? Because even though... it wasn't like a stranger attack or anything. Yeah. It still just feels like the classic phrase, very close to home.
Very, yeah.
So Katie was incredibly kind and compassionate, and not only did you get that impression from friends and family, but also within her job. Yeah. So she was actually a mental health nurse, and she was obviously an absolutely dedicated mother to her 4 kids. That's a very high pressure role. Yeah. And then to be taking care of 4
children as well,
on top of that.
Yeah, and she wasn't very old either, was she?
No, so she was working incredibly hard. I mean, even I feel like your late 20s, 30s is when you start actually figuring out life.
Yeah.
And that realisation that you've got to figure it out hits pretty hard, I would say.
100%.
So to have to go through that whilst having 4 children, whilst having this pretty labour-intensive and also mentally draining job. Yeah, she was doing incredibly well.
Yeah, and I think from the way that her friends and family spoke about her, saying she was fun, she was bubbly, she was outgoing, but extremely compassionate and caring. Yeah. And I think that just came across in every single area of her life.
Yeah, she was really close to her family as well, wasn't she? And I think when you do have those elements of support, it does tend to make things a little easier. Yeah. So she was known to be the apple of her father's eye. Yeah. Really close to her mum. She spoke to them all the time, really, didn't she?
Yeah.
Very regularly. And saw them regularly as well.
And she had lots of hobbies as well. So she's always like going out and socializing. She was quite into the gym and fitness in general. Yeah. So it's like, as well as having the children and having this sort of pretty stressful job, she's still managed to be a sociable person and fit all this in as well. When I was reading through, I thought, wow, she actually did a lot, didn't she?
I know, how?
I wouldn't have the energy to do all that.
Yeah. So she had a very full life, but the only thing that kind of was missing from her perspective was a romantic partner.
Yeah.
She'd obviously been with the father of her children, but she'd not got a partner at the time. So she actually started talking on Facebook to people. Now, again, Facebook's changed over the years, hasn't it? I'd say in the last few years, Facebook tends to be the first one that people leave behind almost.
Yeah.
But there was a point, and this was probably the same kind of time, that it was one of the most commonly used. And you just used to add people that you know vaguely.
Yeah.
Or you'd comment on something and someone else might comment. And you used to message people that weren't as known to you. Whereas now, if I message someone, I know them really well. Like, I'd also have their number in my phone.
And as well now for me, I when I'm on Facebook, my Facebook is for people that I do know, like my family and my close friends. And then we have other stuff now like Instagram, Snapchat and stuff for people who are maybe you don't know quite as well. But social media does play quite a big part in this case in general, doesn't it? As we'll find out later on.
Yeah. So in 2018, Katie then meets a man on Facebook and they start talking. So likelihood is friend request was sent, then you start
slid
messaging.
Into the DMs.
Who are you? How are you? Kind of thing. And she starts talking to this person who ultimately she would go on to meet. And because they'd got this mutual interest in the gym, actually started training at the gym together.
Yeah.
Soon struck up a relationship, and this person actually moved into her home. For the first 2 years, everything appeared to be going really well. He got on really well with her family, the kids, but that then soon changed.
Yeah, it was all about to change.
So the person that Katie struck up this relationship with was a man called Marcus Osborne. And Marcus he was kind of known again in the local area, wasn't he?
Yeah, he'd had like a bit of a sort of traumatic past when he was younger, as in terms of growing up. So he was born in 1988, so he was a little bit older than Katie, so he was the same age as me. And he was actually born in Huddersfield, lived with his mom and his sister, but when he was really young, like around 5 years old, he was seen to have started developing emotional and anger issues. And I think his mom thought this is actually affecting his sister now as well. So she, sent him away. Didn't really send him away. She sent him to live with his grandma, who was in the Midlands. And I think at this point, it was quite clear that he felt like he'd been pushed out, that he wasn't wanted, and that could have maybe escalated these issues in this case.
Yeah, from what I saw as well, he was obviously his anger and his behavioural issues had an impact on his sister. But when they were both young, he was really close to his sister.
They had a really good relationship, didn't they? Yeah.
So it seems like obviously his behaviour would have started impacting her, but he probably felt really hurt that he was really close to her, but then he was kind of seen as this negative, bad influence when actually he probably loved his sister.
Yeah,
massively.
So when he went to Dudley, he was still getting in fights at school, and things were sort of progressively getting worse as he was getting older, especially on sort of the violence and the outbursts. And he did manage to go to college for a little bit and then get some odd jobs here and there, but I don't think anything really stuck or anything lasted.
It's difficult as well, isn't it? Because I think when you're taken in by older members of the family, obviously it's incredible that those family members step up and show up. But I do think in certain cases you would find it more difficult to connect to them, just in terms of them understanding you. Like sometimes with your parents...
It's a total different generation, isn't it? It's like not even your parents' generation, it's another generation.
And it's bad enough sometimes trying to get your parents to understand kind of what you're going through, or issues like social media or friendships and things.
Yeah.
So it must have been pretty isolating to a degree. But he then moves back in with his mum at about the age of 17. And things just continued to escalate behaviourally, really.
Yeah.
So in 2008, he was then convicted for armed robbery, supplying Class A drugs, firearms offences, which is crazy to think that he was just brandishing these kind of weapons in like Huddersfield and Wakefield. And
it was an armed robbery of a convenience store, I think.
Yeah.
And he went in there with what they actually found out to be a BB gun, but you're still causing the same amount of distress as having an actual real proper
loaded
gun.
weapon, and it's intent as well. It's still like you've clearly gone in there to scare people.
And I think now as well they can give you the same sentence because the intent is the same. So you would get the same sentence for carrying an imitation firearm as what you would as carrying a normal, because you've still, that person wasn't any less scared because they didn't know, did they?
No.
Yeah.
So clearly had no regard for others, really.
No.
I wouldn't say.
And he was in and out of prison quite a lot as well, wasn't he?
I did lose track, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I've kind of got all of the general offences, but I couldn't kind of give it a specific timeline, because it did seem pretty consistent in terms of being in and out.
He ended up with 12 convictions and 27 offences. And for the armed robbery, he actually did 7 years in prison.
Yeah.
So, you know, these 27 offences is absolutely crazy. Once he was released, he actually then went back to prison for 4 months for assaulting his girlfriend.
Yeah, and he'd not been with her at the time for very long at all, as far as I could tell.
No.
It was a pretty new relationship, and then he was already this level of violent towards her.
It's crazy because after that, he actually did another 1 year stint for GBH on another girl. Mm-hmm. And this girl, he had only been talking to for 2 weeks. And her injuries were absolutely horrific. Yeah. And I just think to be, like you said, that level so soon into the relationship, this is just building up a bit of a picture of... you know, he's not just doing these offences, you know, your drugs and guns, and which are obviously all serious offences, but it's now building up more and more towards women. Yeah,
and it's disregard for, I mean, women apparently with romantic partners, but just disregard for people in general, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like he cares. If he's angry, then it doesn't matter who he takes it out on, because he's angry.
Yeah. And this girl who he got sentenced to the 1 year for had got a broken jaw in 3 places, and she had to have a metal plate fitted.
Yeah, it's just horrific, isn't it? And to think that you've only known someone 2 weeks, you wouldn't expect that level of violence at all.
Oh no, definitely not. You'd still be thinking, I'd be still planning a date at that stage, sort of thing. So after going from one job to another, in and out of work, and in between in and out of prison, and committing all these offences, he decided to start being a PT at a local gym. And because we are in the local area, and I go to one of the main local gyms here, I was like, I wonder what gym it is.
Yeah, have you ever...
Yeah,
you
because
might have bumped into
at this time, when was this again? 2018.
Yeah.
So I started at my gym in 2017.
Right,
and I was thinking, oh my God, was he a PT when I was there? But I don't know what gym it is, and I could never find anything on that. No. And I don't think that information will have been
because it's not really pertinent, is it?
No, I just wanted to know just to be nosy.
No, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got the... him becoming a PT now, and then we've got Katie, who is really into the gym and the training sessions together. It's just easier, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you've met someone, you've both got the same interests, you can train together, you can see each other in the gym.
Yeah.
So I think she probably thought at this point, like, oh, it's actually fitting in.
Yeah,
it's really linking in for me.
Yeah, it's one of those that makes sense, doesn't it? It becomes an easy relationship straight from the off, because you're already going to be spending time together. She's going to be very busy.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for them to see each other and do
train
that
at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At this stage, so they obviously have met on Facebook, started talking, started training together. We don't know whether or not she had any awareness of his history with previous relationships.
Yeah, I actually saw something about, because she'd said the first 2 years of the relationship was really good, that she had actually received a few messages with links to articles about him previously.
Right, yeah.
But she had not seen any of that side of him. Like, there was literally nothing.
Yeah.
So she was like, I don't know if it's even true. Like, what,
it's so
there was
difficult.
no need for her to really believe it in a way.
Yes. Yeah, no, and I think people do tend to go on the evidence, don't they?
Yeah.
You kind of think, right, well, if he has committed multiple offences, but if he's served his time, if you've been with someone for 2 years and they haven't shown any signs of that, you would trust them implicitly at that stage.
But this whole case just shows how good he was at manipulating and at ultimately hiding his past. But we know that was all going to unravel.
Yeah. So Katie's mum did say that she had been concerned a little bit. He just seemed a bit off sometimes. There was something about him that she couldn't necessarily place, but that she didn't trust.
Mother's instinct.
Yeah. However, the relationship did appear to be going well, and they just wanted to let Katie kind of play it out and see how it would go. Obviously, they'd be there for her if anything did come of it, but it's one of those where, as a parent, if you try and interfere with someone's relationship,
it's probably going to make it worse as well, because we've all been in that situation where your mum and dad have not liked someone that you've been with, and the more they say it to you, the more you are determined to prove everyone wrong. So I think they are obviously
they did
in this situation. Obviously they will not think that they did the right thing now looking back, but at the time it is what most parents would do.
So Katie's family were kind of remaining positive. They were close anyway, so I think they probably felt like if something did start to happen, they would already have an awareness and be there for her. And unfortunately, Marcus did then start to become coercive, controlling, and then ultimately abusive towards Katie.
Yeah, I think it started off like the checking the phone and sort of not trusting her. He had been on her social media and he'd been like blocking her male friends. He'd even messaged male friends saying, don't message her.
And he was deciding, he was almost telling her that if she got a friend request or whatever, then he'd be the one to decide.
He was sort of in control of her social media in a way, wasn't he? Yeah.
And then not only that, one of the common signs of control is when they start dictating what you should wear or what you shouldn't wear. And he then slowly started taking away things that she enjoyed. So started suggesting that they see less of her parents, less of her family.
It's isolating her, isn't it? Which is one of the main signs of domestic abuse, isn't it?
Yeah. Obviously, she really enjoyed going to the gym, but then it became that they had to go together rather than they wanted to go together. She started seeing, much less of her friends. And he then did become physical. And one of the first known accounts of this physical violence, Osborne actually also injured Katie's pet cat. And this is quite common, again, in domestic abuse situations. So he'd actually picked up the cat and thrown the cat at her. But in a lot of cases, abusers will use pets as almost like a bargaining chip.
Yeah, and they'll say like, oh, if you leave, then I will kill your dog or your cat or whatever. Yeah. And it's sort of a leverage. They'll say, if you do this, I'm going to hurt your pet. Yeah. And, we all love our pets.
Yeah, of course.
And if
that's
someone said anything was going to happen.
Solitude, if you're in such a, an unstable environment and you've got this love from a pet, then you are going to kind of cling on to that.
And it's a bit like a child as well, isn't it? Like with the pet, they can't like really fight back or defend themselves or, you know, say anything.
Yeah.
So I just think it's
just terrific.
and a lot of women actually don't leave an abusive relationship because they have got a pet.
Yeah, I've got some stats on that, actually.
Yeah, it was really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, so quite often, I just before I do the stats as well, I think in some cases, depending on how manipulative the offender is, they will actually buy the victim these pets in the first place as a form of then keeping the victim where they are.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of cases, obviously, it then becomes that the victim doesn't want to leave because they feel uncertain about what will happen to their pets, but it is the offender that's bought them in the first place, A, to look good and to look caring and kind and giving, but then B, ultimately, because they know that the victim is loving and
It's another
caring
holdover,
and
isn't
a
it?
holdover them, yeah. So a couple of stats. Between 50% and 70% of domestic abuse survivors have stated that their abusers had either harmed or threatened to harm their pets. The PDSA did a study which found that 49% of domestic violence victims had their pets harmed by their abuser. And up to 71% of victims admitted that they did delay leaving their abusive relationship for fear of their pet's safety, not knowing what would happen to them. And a lot of people probably won't understand that. When I've spoken to people before about this kind of situation, they've said, well, couldn't you give the pet to someone else? Or, you know, it's only the pets if your life's at danger and if you're being beaten, then you should come. But it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't. And I think people can only fully understand the situation when you've been through it.
Yeah, and if you've experienced.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in this case, I have been through some big couple of absolutely horrific relationships.
Yeah.
And it's not as easy as just walking out and leaving. And I mean, before I'd ever been in that situation, I would probably have thought the same thing. Like, just leave. Like, come on, you can do it. You can leave. And it was really not that easy. I did some work for a domestic violence charity locally, and the amount of times that people flee and you manage to get them and they say, yeah, that's it, I'm leaving. And then you come into work a couple of days later, they've gone and they've gone back. And I think it's on average something like more than 7 times someone will go back to their abuser before they
can fully leave. Yeah, it's just so complex. And I think the more that it's talked about and the more that people try and understand, or at least listen to another perspective, that's the only way that things can improve for victims. But there are also charities like, there's a charity called Refuge for Pets and the Dogs Trust, which is also like a very popular one. But they actually offer like a foster home service.
I thought this was so nice because you feel like you're going to have to give your pet up.
Yeah.
When I've been in these situations, I actually didn't have any pets. Thank God, because I only dread to think what would have happened to them in these situations. But I didn't actually know that there were charities that did this. So I learned something new. And I think if I didn't know about it and I've actually been in that situation and worked with people who have been through that situation, a lot more people won't know about it. And I think that could actually save someone's life.
I agree.
Because your pet is not fully rehomed. It just goes into foster care.
Yeah.
So when you are back on your feet and when you've got your own place and when you are safe, you can then
it's a level of certainty as well, isn't it? There's so much that's uncertain in that circumstance. How people are going to react to you leaving, how your offender's going to react, how you're going to feel, whether or not you're going to be able to afford to live on your own. There's so much uncertainty that if that one thing is kind of settled, then it does make a big difference.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So again, this was just off the back of an attack on Katie, where Osborne had used her pet cat as part of a physical attack on her. But the relationship continued to be, again, I think because it started off so kind of passionate and intense, and it did kind of move quite quickly from the off, that it all spirals so quickly that you don't see it coming, which is part of the problem.
And you're sort of in like your honeymoon period, you're like swept up in like a little bubble, aren't you, in the beginning of any relationship. And it's easy to overlook these red flags as well.
Which is why when a couple of them start to show, very often victims forgive the behaviour because they have all of this counter evidence to prove the opposite. So it's more of a one-off.
But the counter evidence is normally just a front.
Yes.
And unfortunately, in this situation, things did turn violent towards Katie. He ended up breaking her arm and her fingers. He caused extensive bruising. So he was physically violent as well.
So obviously he then continues to be emotionally abusive, but in one of these attacks he had punched her and kicked her so much to the extent that she'd got bruising of her ribs and her stomach that she couldn't physically get out of bed. She was bedbound. At this point as well, he's also threatening to take his own life if she leaves. So obviously in these attacks she likely is saying like, you can't do this to me. I am going to leave. But at that point his then retaliation is to say, if you ever left me, he's going to make threats towards her family, but then he's also saying, and I'm going to hurt myself.
And with when she'd been kicked that hard in the stomach and she couldn't get out of bed, it's like any damage to your ribs in general is the worst. And I've had broken ribs,
it affects your
and
breathing,
you can't do anything.
No.
I couldn't cough, I couldn't laugh. Not that I wanted to laugh at any point. I couldn't even stand up straight.
But like sitting to go to the toilet,
anything that you do is agony. And I feel like it's the worst thing to break, because if you sort of break your finger or break your arm, they put a pot on it or a strap on it or something. With your ribs, they can't do anything. You're just on painkillers and you've just got to wait it out for it to heal. So I think that is absolutely awful. And for her to get out of bed even after a week was pretty good going for the violence that she'd just been through.
So that attack, which was unprovoked, at that point Osborne was 33, and it actually took place on Friday the 28th of April, and we're now in 2023 at this point.
So they've been together for quite a while by now, haven't they?
As we said, she was bedbound. She did manage to then get up and about, and by the beginning of May, when she'd started to feel like she was actually recovering physically, she clearly thought, this is enough, and she decided to take the children and go and stay at her nana's, who lived locally, to get away from Marcus Osborne.
That week must have been awful for her, because you've got 4 children to still look after, and you are in that state and you physically can't get out of bed. Who'd you tell? Who'd you go to? Because he's still got you there. And there's nothing you can do about it, because if you then say anything at that point in time, I would be thinking, what if he beats me up again? And then the damage is going to be even more severe.
And also at that point, you'd probably be worried about the children getting taken away. Do you know what I mean?
Like, the kids' safety in general.
And you're kind of trapped physically in multiple ways then. You're trapped within your home with him, but then physically you're kind of trapped because you can't move as much as
and you wouldn't even be able to defend yourself or fight back if anything did happen. But I think while Katie went to move in with her nan, having the safety of a family around her, it is more of like a security, isn't it? And then that's when she was able to actually end the relationship with Osborne. But we know in the past how threatening he's been. So I think she sort of knew what was coming, but knew that she was surrounded by a family and probably felt a lot safer in a family home.
Safer and braver to tackle it, really. But I just want to say, like, the fact that she even left that situation, not only left it and just said they'd had an argument, but then was actually honest about what had been going on, is incredible in itself. Like, you think for a lot of victims, even if they get to that stage and then they don't leave, that's a huge feat in itself. So she did then break things off. She ended the relationship with Osborne, but as we see in a lot of these cases, he then began bombarding her with text messages, again threatening her and her children.
There was so many messages, and like, I don't even think they really flipped from being nice, saying, "Oh, come back, we can sort this out." It was all the ones that I saw anyway were all quite horrific.
Yeah, yeah. By the 10th of May, again, she'd stuck to her guns and she very, very bravely then reported the abuse and these threatening text messages, which thankfully she had a lot of proof of.
She did, and
to the police.
Just to put it into perspective, one of them said, "Katie, I will end you permanently. If I see you talking to another man, I will end you." So that is definitely a threat to her life.
Yeah.
And with the violence that is already carried out, I don't doubt that he would have done something. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, to me, it's just horrific as well that he's bringing it back to like talking to other men. Like the last thing on her mind, the last thing she'd be thinking about.
You can't get out of bed and you've got 4 children, but I'm talking to other men.
Yeah. It's just, yeah. So by the 12th of May, they did actually have enough to arrest Osborne for assault, domestic violence, coercive control, and a restraining order was put in place. He was ultimately then released on bail, but there were strict conditions, obviously, that he couldn't come anywhere near Katie.
Yeah, there was a little bit in between that as well when Katie went in to report this to the police station. And you might not have picked up on this as much as I did, but this exact thing happened to me. So Katie went into the police station to report it and they told her that no one was available to take her statement.
Mm-hmm.
And they sent her home and said, "We'll send some officers round to your house the next day."
Yeah.
That was the exact same thing that happened to me, but mine was with South Yorkshire Police.
Yeah.
And they never sent anyone round to take my statement either. In this case, West Yorkshire Police, from my dealings with both of them in different sort of capacities.
Yeah.
I'm not going to slate any particular person, but the West Yorkshire Police have been a lot better at dealing with situations like this than South Yorkshire was. But when I went through this situation, I was 21. Mm-hmm. So it is a long time ago. It's almost 15 years ago. Yeah. So I like to think that over these years, there's been more things put into place.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was really scary. When I was reading through that and seeing the police turn her away and just physically knowing what's going to happen because I've been through it, it's like, no, you see, I was like reading thinking, no, just someone please see
up
it.
The courage, isn't it? Because then you've done it, you've gone there, and then if someone says, "Oh yeah, no, sorry, you can't do that right now," then the likelihood is a lot of people would then think,
I'm not coming back.
Yeah, and it's a sign and I'm not going to do it.
You expect the police to help you.
Just to give it a bit of context for people that aren't in that situation, I think one of a good example of the not being heard was in that scene in Baby Reindeer where he goes up to the police station and it's whoever's in the custody sergeant almost is trying to take the statement and clearly not believing how seriously this stalking was. And it's a similar thing, isn't it? You know, we'll go home and we'll talk about it again, but it's not that easy.
So luckily Katie did go and give her statement and he was arrested. But then it's just the whole thing about the bail situation now, because released. I mean the police, I know it's out of sort of their control because there's conditions, and if the police have then put these conditions in place, you have to go with the fact that from what she'd said, they didn't think he was going to maybe breach the bail. And I'm sure we don't work in the police, so I'm sure there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to decide whether someone is granted bail or not. And that kind of comes within the court system, doesn't it? The judicial system, rather than the police. Like, once they've handed it over, they've kind of... I feel like the police do get a lot of blame for stuff because they are on the front line. Whereas it's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes with the CPS. That is out of the police's hands, isn't it?
So on the 13th of May, so at this stage... Osborne has been arrested, he's been released on bail, and at that point he decided to stay with a friend literally meters away from Katie's home.
It might as well have been opposite. I bet he could have seen into Katie's house.
It was literally like 2 or 3 doors down, and again, the chances of his friend kind of letting him stay, living that close to her, it's all just so
he was almost stalking her
but
at this
he was
point.
absolutely stalking her at this point. And that was then proven by the fact that he hacked into her Snapchat account. Now, we say hacked, whether or not he already knew the password or what, we're not sure. But ultimately, Katie had no awareness that Osborne was also logged into her account while she was still using it.
I think that if he'd been controlling in the past, maybe he had passwords for another couple of things and thought, oh, I'll just try and see if they log in. Yeah. And she's probably used the same password for all the social media accounts. So then he's managed to get access to that.
But without her knowledge, he is now accessing her Snapchat account and reading all of her interactions with her friends. And obviously he's jealous anyway. He's incredibly controlling. And Katie had started talking to another local man called Stephen Harnett, who was 25. Now, Harnett was known for being really lovely. He was known as being, what was it, not golden child.
I can't remember the name, but he'd got a child himself, so he was a father. And
a heart of gold.
And everyone was saying like how much of a good dad he was, how loving and caring he was. And he just came across as a nice person. So he was actually originally from Manchester. And then had moved over here. He'd been in Dalton for about 2 years, and with him being from the area, that's probably how he'd got Katie on Snapchat.
Yeah. So they had been communicating, but only for around 10 days.
Yeah.
So it wasn't kind of this ongoing situation, but they were talking. Obviously, he was being supportive of Katie, and they'd never actually met at this stage. So there were plans for them to go on effectively a first date on the 14th of May.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because he's now logged in, Marcus Osborne sees these messages on Snapchat and now knows that the following day, Katie and Stephen are going to be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah. So we're now on the 14th of May, and this is the night of the date. So Katie actually leaves the house at 9:30 at night to go to the cinema with Stephen. And at first I thought, wow, this is very late.
I did. I was like,
oh, I wouldn't be going out at that time. But I think she did it because obviously she's got 4 children and she had to get a babysitter to come and watch the children. And I think she put the kids to bed.
Yeah.
Got them all settled. So what time kids made to go to bed? 7, 7:30. She's made sure they've probably had food, bathed, bed, and then got ready to go out. So I think that's why it was so late in general.
Yeah.
So they had a babysitter come round and she was referred to as V. And I don't actually know her name. She's referred to V to protect her identity because we're going to go into a little bit more detail on V.
We've kind of been talking about this. We've found out kind of as much as we can, but there is a degree of protection of their identity.
Yeah.
But it is quite vague. Generally speaking, like in other cases, like the Rhys Jones case, they've outlined the exact age of the person.
Yeah.
They've said why
this is why we can't release the name. Yeah.
But there is a bit of vaguity in this one. But for now, babysitter, name is V.
Yep. So at the same time, obviously Osborne is still tracking the messages between Katie and Stephen. And he actually took a taxi from his house in Rawthorpe Lane to the house that he used to share with Katie. And somehow he has managed to prise open and get in through an upstairs window and get into the house. So he knows that Katie's out of the house. Yeah. He probably knows that there's a babysitter in there with her 4 children.
Children in there. It's just...
And the 4 children that he knows and that he's known for 3-4 years.
But again, this is just the disregard for other people. Yeah. Because he's then obviously dead set on whatever he's decided to do. So when he actually broke in, it was about 11:50. So again, it's unlikely that anyone would have seen it because it would have been pitch black. Everyone's going to be in bed. And if it's through an upstairs window, the likelihood is it's either down the side of the house or in the back garden kind of thing. Ultimately, V, the babysitter, did hear something
Yeah.
and got up to investigate.
She
as
probably
you would.
thought that one of the kids had got out of bed or something, and she's probably thinking, oh God, who's got up now? I'm going to have to go and put them back to bed.
Yeah.
So she's pretty much gone to check out what's happened.
But unfortunately, she was then confronted by Osborne, who then pinned her up against the wall, hit her repeatedly in the face, which left her with facial fractures, and she then was knocked unconscious. So straight from the off, we already know that he is incredibly violent. He's obviously got himself worked up because he's come up with whatever plan he's decided to break into the house for.
And
this
is very premeditated, isn't it?
And the whole then kind of series of events which we're about to talk about, incredibly premeditated, incredibly calculated, and with just no level of regard or remorse at all. So shortly after this, just coincidentally, Katie then rings V, the babysitter, to just check in. Obviously, she's now been gone since about 9:30.
She's probably just come out of the cinema.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About 3 hours later, she then rings V just to check that everything's okay. At that point, Osborne saw V's phone ringing and saw that it was Katie, and threatens the babysitter with a knife to her throat and says, answer the phone and tell Katie to come home now. So V obviously did that, and again, I don't think at that point that V made it sound like there was anything wrong with the kids. It was just a case of,
like, what time are you back? Can you come? Yeah.
If you could come back now, that'd be great, kind of thing.
Katie arrived back at the house less than 30 minutes after that phone call, because where they went to the cinema is not actually that far away. It's probably 15, 20 minutes away.
It was actually a 9-inch kitchen knife that Osborne had already picked up and then threatened V, the babysitter, with. And as soon as Katie entered her own home, V, the babysitter, repeatedly shouted, run, which is just horrendous. But Osborne got to Katie first, originally stabbing her in her shoulder. He then dragged her inside the house so that she couldn't escape, and began repeatedly stabbing her.
Yeah, so this is all happening now. So the date was on the night of the 14th, but the attack then goes over into sort of the early hours of the 15th as well. And Katie was actually stabbed 99 times.
It's just,
I honestly couldn't believe the amount of injuries that she'd got.
Do you know what I think as well? Stab wounds cause a hell of a lot of damage, which is why they're so lethal. I mean, in a lot of testimony and from like forensic experts, but then also generally speaking, the judge at sentencing will say just one of these stab wounds would have been enough to kill the victim.
Yeah.
99 stab wounds is
it's incomprehensible. It's like you can't even...
Katie physically wouldn't have been the same person anymore at that stage, and then for someone to continue to attack her.
And then it also gets worse because as Katie is dying, Osborne then sexually assaults Katie, and he was actually heard saying, I told you I would kill you, this is your fault. So as she's dying, he is still blaming her, and that's her last words that she will have heard.
And she was begging him to stop. The babysitter reported that she was saying, stop, Marcus, please, I can't breathe.
Yeah.
And to think that she's still she's physically pleading with him. She's not
right
angry
until the end.
She's just asking him to stop.
And in Katie's last moments, V, the babysitter, had asked to actually go downstairs and be with Katie, and he had said no, she can die alone.
Yeah, and he referred to it
how heartless, and how, I mean, what he's already done is horrendous, but to leave her to die on her own as well, this guy, I can't even describe. I've got no words to describe.
Again, then threatening the babysitter, saying that if she did go downstairs, she'd die. But then, quite calmly, taking the knife, going into the bathroom, cleaning the knife down, coming out of the room, taking Katie's phone, and at that point sending Stephen, who was obviously at home at this stage, he's had an amazing date with Katie.
He's probably waiting for Katie to message as well and say,
saying
I'm
that she's
home
at
or
home
whatever.
safe.
Yeah, thanks for a nice time.
But at this point, Osborne took Katie's phone and sent Stephen a text impersonating her, asking him to come over to the house.
Yeah.
So she then, or as it appears, Stephen's received a text saying from Katie, please will you come over, kind of thing. And again, this goes to show the kind of lovely person that Stephen was, because he said, are you sure? We've only just met. Is this really something that you want?
Are you sure you're ready for this?
Are you sure yeah. And you just think, even then, he's
so considerate.
He's checking in with her, which, I mean, rightly so, but unfortunately that's not.
I know,
always
that should
the
be the
case.
bare minimum, shouldn't it?
Yeah. But yeah. At this point, Osborne, again impersonating Katie, responds, yeah, babe, of course I am. When you get here, make sure you use the side door so you don't wake the children. I'll book you a taxi now to pick you up and bring you here. So this is calculated on a number of levels.
Yeah.
He's impersonating Katie, who he has literally just killed in her own home. He's now very calmly using her text to lure a second victim to a home. At this stage, it's absolutely in order to kill him.
Yeah.
Not only that is he, but he's being conscious of how this secondary victim is going to enter the house, because he now knows that Katie is lying dead in her own front doorway, and booking him a taxi.
It's almost to make sure that he turns up,
that he gets there.
So he could probably track the taxi as well. And Stephen did get in the taxi totally unaware of the danger that he was going to be walking into.
Well, again, it's just not one of those things that you would ever anticipate, because why would you?
Yeah. So at 2 a.m, Stephen arrives at Katie's and walks in via the side door like he's been told to do. Osborne did the same thing, and as soon as Stephen walked through the door, he attacked him straight away and stabbed him between 20 and 30 times. And that is still so many times, and some of these stab wounds actually punctured his lungs as well.
It's horrific, and unfortunately, stab wounds are not something that is always instant in terms of death. It is likely that they would have struggled. Obviously, Katie was begging for a life.
Yeah, and with your lungs as well, you're obviously struggling.
It stops you breathing.
To breathe, and if you're trying to talk or say anything, but I'm guessing it's not a fast death, is it either?
No, horrific. It didn't stop there, because obviously we now know that Osborne sexually assaulted Katie as she was dying, which is just horrific. But he then decided to strip Stephen naked and mutilate his body. He actually cut off his penis. Not only did he commit those four offences really, because you've got the mutilation of the victims, the sexual assault, and then the murders, but he then very calmly returned back upstairs, leaving his two victims in the state that they were in, and proceeded to sexually assault V at knife point.
And he said, it's going to be a long time since I'm going to get to have sex again.
So he's just thinking of himself the whole time, and the severity and the horrific nature of the crimes that he's just committed clearly haven't kind of snapped him out of it at all.
Yeah, and I just think even his actions after this, so Osborne went and ran a bath and said the bath was for V, the babysitter, so after he's just sexually assaulted her, but she said she was too scared to leave the room and she didn't want to leave the children. So obviously she refused this bath, and he used that bath then to wash himself down and clean himself up.
He then went back downstairs and staged the scene of the victims. So there's just no remorse whatsoever. He's effectively, at this point now, just enjoying committing such horrific acts of violence.
Yeah.
Because for him to not even be bothered, he's not worried at any point here, is he?
No.
He's not worried that it's going to be discovered.
No.
He's not worried that it's going to be found out. He knows that he's got V scared to such an extent that he's got full control, that he's just then sitting and having a bath.
And he also, when after all this has happened, sat and started listening to the voice messages between Katie and Stephen. And he was apparently listening to them, and he was saying in reaction to the voice messages, oh, well, they're not be doing that anymore, will they? Oh, well, they're not going to get a chance to do that. Oh, they're not doing that now. Like, just so, like, no
Callous.
remorse or anything, sort of replying to these voice notes, which I thought was really strange.
In terms of having staged the scene, he left both victims naked from the waist down, but dragged them into the living room and then placed them in like a starfish position side by side. And he's clearly just enjoying what he's doing at this point.
Yeah.
By 8 a.m. on the 15th, so this attack, if you think about it, if she got home by
midnight sort of thing, yeah.
We're now talking 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So a whole night of unimaginable.
The trauma for V and the children, though, as well. Because
that's what
I know that V had actually stayed in the room and stopped the children coming out so that they didn't see any of this. But you can't tell me they didn't hear some of it.
No. Oh, God. No, absolutely. They'll be traumatised. V saw one of her friends get murdered, was then sexually assaulted, knows that she couldn't do anything to have stopped then the murder of another victim.
Yeah.
It's hours and hours.
Yeah.
By 8 a.m, Osborne, and we don't really know for what reason, calmly again walked round to the neighbours' home, the next door neighbours of Katie, knocked on the door and told them, Katie is dead, and I've also killed Stephen.
I think at this point the neighbour will be thinking, is he joking? Like, is this some sort of sick joke? So the neighbour did actually go round to the house, didn't she?
Yeah, because Osborne had said, do you want to see the bodies? And that just in itself doesn't seem legitimate, does it? It just seems odd.
Maybe the neighbour thought that like he was playing a prank or something, because the neighbour will have known of him because Katie was living next door to this neighbour when she was living with Osborne. So surely they knew of each other.
Yeah.
Because if someone had just said that, I don't think I'd be going round to the house with them.
No.
So that's what I mean. There must have been some familiarity.
A familiarity.
That's the one.
Yeah. Ultimately, the neighbour then did go round to the home and found this horrific staged scene. Would have seen blood upon entry, because obviously the first attack on Katie happened right in her own doorway.
How traumatic for the neighbour.
But at that point, they then rang 999 and the police arrived. When the police arrived, they found that V was still upstairs, huddled in one room with the 4 children, and she'd been that scared to leave for fear of her also being killed. And again, there's not one element of you that wouldn't think that you were going to die next.
Yeah.
He's just killed 2 people right in front of you.
Yeah.
Why would he keep her alive?
Yeah, you're in shock, aren't you?
Yeah. So still horrific. But
so when the sirens were coming, you could hear the sirens coming to the house. It wasn't until that point that Osborne actually left. So he stayed there up until the point when the police were on the way, and then thought, I can hear them, now I'll go. And then he ran off and said to the neighbour, I've got some things to sort, or something like that. I've got some things to get organised or something. And it wasn't until obviously the police got there, then they will start a manhunt for Osborne, thinking we've now got a double murderer on the loose. But luckily, later that day, Osborne did hand himself in and confessed.
Yeah, because he's not going to be scared of the police, is
No.
it? Do you know what I mean? He's been, how many charges was it that he'd got previously? 27, 28?
Yeah.
So he's not going to have any fear for
He's been arrested
the
multiple
justice
times.
system.
Yeah.
But ultimately handed himself in, was arrested for 2 counts of murder and the imprisonment and sexual assault of V. Absolutely unfathomable. Can you imagine, even as an officer, if you'd worked for over 30 years in the force, coming across that scene?
Yeah. Is horrendous.
Yeah.
Luckily, he did plead guilty, and he was remanded this time, obviously because of the seriousness of the crimes. I think when it's something like rape or murder, I think you're automatically remanded, and especially because he'd ran off and left the crime scene, he was probably thought to be what's it called, like flight risk or something. Yeah.
So it went to Leeds Crown Court. Obviously, there's no trial at that point because he has confessed, but the sentencing took place on March 1st, 2024, so only last year.
Yeah.
At this point, Osborne is 35, and the judge sentenced him to a whole life order for the murder of Katie and a second life order for the murder of Stephen.
A life order is actually quite rare.
Yeah.
It's only for the most sort of horrific crimes because it means you haven't got possibility of parole. It is the most severe punishment that you can get, isn't it?
And so 2 life orders is obviously especially.
And then on top of that, he actually got 10 years for the imprisonment and the rape of V, the babysitter.
Yeah, quite rightly so.
Yeah.
There aren't really any words for this one, is there? I think I've been stuck for words quite a lot because there is no logic or reason or understanding of that kind of offender.
Yeah.
I don't think.
No, not at all.
Sometimes it seems more behavioural, or it'll come from fetish, or it'll come from, do you know what I mean?
This is like just pure jealousy and rage and anger towards this one person, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the detective superintendent was Alan Weeks, he was called, from West Yorkshire Police, actually said this was amongst the worst crimes that him and the team had ever seen in their entire careers.
Yeah.
So it just puts it into perspective. They see this sort of stuff, I don't want to say every day, but they do see a lot of murders, a lot of violent crimes, and for them to say how horrendous it is must have been awful emotionally for them as well. To finish off, I have just got a few statements from Katie's family from after the sentence, and I think they were just really lovely. So we've got one. Katie was a shining, beautiful and deeply caring soul whose presence lit up any room from the moment she entered it. As a family, we will miss her laughter, her fun and her jokes. We will never again have the joy of loving messages from her at special times or spending special moments with her. There is so much we could say about the monster who took Katie away from us. A man, if he can be called that, whose name does not deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as hers. His sentencing today will not affect the life sentence of loss our family has been inflicted with, which I thought was really impactful.
Yeah, poignant.
And then Stephen's mom also made a statement saying, Stephen Harnett was a bright young lad who always made everyone laugh and smile all the time. But most of all, he was my son, my beautiful baby boy. He was a brilliant dad to his baby girl and his dogs, and he loved life and loved protecting those he cared for. The pain I feel is unbearable and indescribable. My heart remains shattered into 1,000 pieces. The pain is too raw and the shock is still too deep. I cannot comprehend what has happened, but to Stephen, I love you.
God, yeah.
I thought they were really impactful statements. So if anyone has been affected by anything in this podcast, it might be you or someone that you know. We've just put a few things in here where you can point people into the right sort of direction. So if you know anyone who is a victim of domestic abuse, there is the Refuge charity, which we spoke about earlier, who also helped with the pet side of things. And then there's also Women's Aid, where you can visit their websites and they can talk you through everything, every step of the way, and still keep your privacy as well.
And for as much as it's crucially important to remember the victims, there are also survivors, and it's important to remember that too.
It is, yeah.
So that's it for this week. We are going to have a lighter episode next week.
We are.
Because again, we need it sometimes.
We do. We've done a lot of case studies in a row, and we thought it was time for something a bit lighter.
Yeah. So next week is going to be an Eyes and Ears episode where we just have a general chat about what we've been watching and listening to. But I'm going to say until then, take care.
Bye.